All into perspective, Ken Geshinga, chief economist here at Mentoria Consulting, is here in studio, and he is, of course, an expert on matters economic, and now joins us here to give us his take. Well, indeed, karibu sana Ken.
Thank you, Peter.
Now, the biggest event of the week, the release of the economic survey.
Right.
I think a fair place to start would be to ask for your take. What exactly do you think stood out?
Right. Well, I think the report confirmed what we always knew,
yes,
that 2017 was one of the toughest years in recent memory.
Yes.
The growth went down from 5.9 in 2016 to 4.9. That's almost a whole 1% drop, and it's something that was not new.
Yes.
I think for me is now the optimism that's coming at the end of the tunnel. There seems to be a new feel that if we can remove the interest rate cap, if the new budget that's going to be tabled this year will sort of support the big four, then maybe we might go back to the 5.9, maybe even 6% that this country needs.
We saw from a lot of different quarters, especially the political ones, who said that that year alone was the worst performing for the Jubilee government. A lot of fasts for them in terms of lows. And looking at the turnaround that has happened, the exuberance, it's now raining, although that is a totally different story. What do you think will be the numbers that come out of the first quarter?
I mean, January was a tough month for this particular quarter. Remember, that's the same time that we had the whole swearing in situation. So I think January we might not see a lot more activity. But beginning from February and March, remember we saw KQ announcing direct flights to New York. We got the Euro bond. We got the golden handshake. So I think a lot more growth is going to come from the last 2 months of Q1. So I expect to see possibly 5.1, 0.2% growth there.
And then, I think for me, what has been the strangest story of the week, the fact that it's raining, lots of parts of Kenya flooded, but when it comes to drinking water, reservoirs still at 30%. That is really odd.
And we've talked about innovation, Peter, for the longest time. And for the life of many, people cannot understand why we can't come up with water harvesting techniques that can be tapped and be used and pumped during the dry season. I don't think it's something very difficult. I think we just have to task our engineers to really think through, or even if you have to go and do benchmarking studies abroad where that happens, I'm sure there's a way of tapping that water for future use. And irrigation, you have to, agriculture, a lot of agriculture has been on rain-fed agriculture. So when are we going to move to irrigation-based agriculture? And that's tied to how well can we harvest our water for irrigation purposes.
We saw the devolution conference, and it was strange that despite the complaints about the weather, it was raining, made governors and others really uncomfortable. Really, there were no discussions of how to tap that water from where I sit, discussions on how to move away from rain-fed agriculture because there was water everywhere at that time. Today we are talking about people having to be rescued in places like Tana River and Garissa, yet this is water that we would have kept us upstream and released slowly through various uses.
I think the Ministry of Water has a lot more insight on what can be done than, I think there's a lot more heavy lifting that needs to be done with the engineers at the Ministry of Water, because as you say, I just came from having a chat with somebody who's already using river water and is already harvesting some of it to do irrigation in his own farm. So if he's able to do it as an individual, there's no reason, even if it's piping architecture, access to insight, and the development partners are always willing to support on this kind of initiative. So I think it's just a matter of innovation and initiative.
Let's talk about the devolution conference. Expected outtakes. This thing in the past has been really a talk shop, where you'd have people sitting there and having these lovely, rosy discussions day in and day out, spending our money in terms of allowances, sleeping, literally boarding and lodging and that sort of thing. And then the takeaways. What exactly are the crystallizations of various innovations, ideas that would come out of these discussions, collaborations that we can say that we expect or should expect to see going forward over the next 1 year?
My highlight was the president's speech. He was unable to make it, I think, due to poor weather, but he gave a live address from State House. And he was very clear that the big four need to work at the county level, particularly healthcare. There's no reason Wanjiko should go to the hospitals and not find aspirin. There's no reason why people cannot get enough produce from their farms. The cartels around sugar, cartels around fertilizer, they need to disappear. He was very big on corruption. So I think you're sort of warming up the country towards the state of the address that will possibly be coming next week. So I think for me, those are the key pillars for me in that, for the whole conference.
I was going to finish with that, to basically ask you to look into your economic crystal ball and project what do you think should be the highlights that we expect from the President's State of the Nation address next week in 30 seconds?
I think consistency is going to be Uhuru Kenyatta's major theme in the second term. So he's already launched the Big Four strategy. So I think almost every public address is almost going to be alluding to the Big Four strategy. And I think he's going to expound more on that. Now, there are things that are preventing the Big Four strategy from taking place. This is corruption, this is issue of cartels, and I think he's going to address that much more firmly. And you remember, what was it, 2 years ago, when he actually read a list of people who would be sort of like facing. I don't think he might go that direction, but I think it's going to be a strong reminder that he's going to be very firm on things around corruption, because that seems to be what's holding back the country from its potential.
Okay, indeed, Ken Geshinga, Chief Economist at Mentoria, asante sana for your time. Of course, it is always having a pleasure. It is always a pleasure having you here, especially in view of the expertise with which you bring to this conversation. And we'll, of course, be tapping you going further. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Well, viewers, that is where we bring it to a close for this edition of KTN Business Today for this week. Of course, up in just a few minutes is a look at what exactly has been going on at the Securities Exchange, the NSE. That, of course, is on this week's edition of the Trading Bell. At 4 o'clock, we will be going to the Swahili News on Mbiu KTN, but we'll be back next week at the same time with more on KTN Business Today. From us here, it is Kwaheri ya kuonana. See you again on Monday.